Rahil sat near the small window of her rented room, looking at the rain falling outside. The sound of raindrops usually brought her peace, but today her heart felt heavy. In her hand, she held an elegant white envelope with a golden seal. The letter inside had only a few lines, but each word carried weight. You are invited to perform at the wedding of Mr. Ayan Malik and Miss Meher Khan. The name felt like a cold wind to her heart. Ayan. The man she once loved, the man she once trusted more than anyone. It had been over a year since they last met. Life had changed so much for both of them, but the wound inside her had never fully healed. Rahil was not just an ordinary singer, she had a voice that touched hearts. In her city, people loved to hear her sing at events, weddings, and gatherings. But she never thought she would be called to sing at his wedding. She placed the invitation on the table, next to a half-empty cup of tea. Her hands trembled as she held her stomach gently. She was carrying a life inside her, a secret that no one around her truly knew. Only her closest friend knew, and even she did not know the full story. Rahil had kept this truth hidden, not because she was ashamed, but because her heart had been broken too deeply to explain it to the world. The rain outside grew heavier, and the city lights blurred behind the glass. Rahil took a deep breath. She needed money for her medical checkups, for the medicines the doctor had prescribed. Singing was the only way she earned her living. Rejecting this offer meant rejecting a large payment that could help her survive the coming months. She closed her eyes and thought about the past. Ayan was once a simple man, full of dreams, just like her. They met at a music event where she was singing, and he was one of the sponsors. He admired her voice, she admired his passion for success. Slowly, their friendship grew. They spent evenings talking about life, their plans, their future. There were promises, warm, sincere promises that one day they would build a life together. But promises are easy to make when the world is kind. When Ayan's business grew and he became a young millionaire, things changed. Calls became fewer, meetings became rare, and then one day, without a proper reason, he walked away. No fights, no clear words, just distance. Rahil had carried that silence in her heart for months. When she found out she was expecting, she hoped he would return. But he never did. Now, as she held the wedding invitation, she felt the same silence screaming at her again. Her phone buzzed. It was her friend, Nadia. "Did you open the letter?" Nadia asked, her voice soft. "Yes," Rahil whispered. "And? Will you go?" "I don't know," Rahil said honestly. "I don't want to see him, but I need the money. Maybe I can just go, sing, and leave." Nadia was quiet for a moment, then said, "Only if you are strong enough. Don't let old memories hurt you again." That night, Rahil could not sleep. She walked around the small room, her feet cold against the wooden floor. The clock ticked slowly. She thought about the hall where the wedding would be held. She had seen pictures of it online. Golden lights, white flowers, a place where people celebrated love. She wondered what song they would ask her to sing. Would he even recognize her? Would he look at her and remember the nights they spent planning a future? Or would he look through her like she was a stranger? She placed a hand on her belly again and whispered, "We will be fine." The next morning, she sent a message to the event manager, agreeing to perform. She requested simple arrangements, a piano, a microphone, and nothing more. Days passed quickly. Rahil prepared her songs quietly. She chose melodies that were soft, filled with emotions, but not too heavy for a wedding night. Each practice reminded her of the time when her songs were only for him. On the day before the wedding, she packed her simple clothes and traveled to the hotel where the event team was waiting. The city looked brighter than ever, but her heart carried a quiet storm. As she stepped into the grand hall for rehearsal, the smell of fresh flowers and the shine of crystal chandeliers almost made her dizzy. And then, she saw him. Ayan stood near the stage, dressed in a black suit. His posture was strong, his face calm, but his eyes, those familiar eyes, widened for a brief moment when they met hers. Time seemed to pause. Rahil forced herself to look away and greeted the event team instead. The hall was filled with people moving chairs, arranging tables, testing lights. Nobody knew the storm behind her polite smile. She was here to sing. Nothing more. But deep down, she knew this night would not be just another performance. It was the beginning of something she could not yet name. The rehearsal began with soft music filling the grand hall. The golden lights above reflected on the polished floor, and the scent of white lilies lingered in the air. Rahil stood near the microphone, her fingers lightly touching the stand, trying to steady her heart. Ian was on the other side of the hall, speaking to the wedding planner. His voice was calm, his words precise, but his eyes often turned toward her, as if pulled by a force he did not want to admit. Rahil adjusted her scarf over her shoulders and started singing a slow melody, her voice smooth but heavy with unspoken feelings. The sound echoed across the hall, touching everyone present. Workers arranging flowers paused for a moment to listen. Even the waiters standing at the back turned their heads slightly. Ian remained still, his eyes fixed on her. Memories began to flood his mind, the nights when he had sat beside her during practice sessions, the evenings when her laughter filled small cafes, the mornings when they walked by the river talking about a simple future. But those days were gone. When the song ended, the hall returned to its busy rhythm. Rahil stepped down from the stage, avoiding his gaze. She walked toward a quiet corner to drink some water. Her hand rested again on her belly, a small act she had started doing unconsciously. "Rahil," a voice called. She turned. Ian was walking toward her, his expression unreadable. "It has been a long time," he said softly. "Yes," Rahil replied, her voice polite but distant. "You accepted the offer," he said, as if trying to start a normal conversation. "I needed the work," she replied simply. There was a pause. Ian looked at her carefully, noticing her tired eyes, the way she stood, slightly protective of herself. He wanted to ask more, but the wedding planner called him from across the hall. He nodded and left without saying another word. Rahil exhaled slowly, her chest tight. That small meeting had felt like an ocean of unspoken words. Later that evening, she sat in her temporary room at the hotel, staring at her reflection in the mirror. She wore a simple pale blue dress, her hair tied back neatly. But her eyes, they carried the weight of too many nights spent thinking about what went wrong. She remembered the first time Ian had promised her the world. He was not rich then, but his dreams were big. He used to say, "One day, I will build something great, and you will sing in halls where everyone will know your name." How strange, she thought, that his promise had come true, but not in the way she imagined. The next day was the final rehearsal. Guests had started arriving at the hotel, and the hall was now decorated almost fully. White drapes hung from the ceiling, candles were placed on every table, and the scent of roses filled the air. Rahil arrived early. She wanted to finish her part quickly and leave before the crowd grew. But fate had other plans. As she was arranging her music sheets, a gentle voice called her name. It was Meher, the bride. Meher was tall, graceful, dressed in a soft peach gown. She smiled warmly, her eyes kind. "You are the singer everyone talks about," she said. "Your voice is beautiful. I am so happy you are here to sing for our wedding." Rahil managed a small smile. "Thank you. I hope the songs bring joy to your evening." Meher nodded and chatted a little more, asking about Rahil's music, her experience, and her plans. She seemed genuine, without even a shadow of suspicion about the history standing between Rahil and Ian. After Meher left, Rahil stood silently for a moment. The kindness in that woman's eyes made her heart ache. She was not here to create problems. She was here to sing, to earn, and to leave. but Ian's presence made everything complicated. Throughout the day, Rahil kept her distance, focusing only on the music. Still, she could feel his gaze every now and then. It was not anger, not even arrogance, it was something deeper, something she could not read easily anymore. In the evening, as the final rehearsal ended, Ian approached her again. "The first song tomorrow night. I want it to be slow and emotional," he said. She nodded. "I already prepared one." He hesitated for a moment. "Good," he replied, then added, "Rahil, this is just work. I hope you understand." She looked at him, her eyes calm but distant. "Yes, Ian. For me, it is only work." As he walked away, Rahil felt a strange heaviness in her chest. She knew tomorrow would not just be another wedding night. Something in the air told her that the past she tried to bury would rise again, not with noise, but with silence that could shake everything around them. That night, in her room, she packed her scarf, her soft pink dress for the wedding, and the music sheets. She sat by the window again, watching the city lights glow in the distance. The rain had stopped, but the streets were still wet, reflecting the lamps like scattered stars. She whispered to herself, "Just one night. Sing, smile, and leave." But in her heart, she knew it would not be that simple. The morning of the wedding arrived with a bright sky. Sunlight touched the hotel windows, and the sound of soft music filled the corridors as the staff prepared for the grand evening. Guests walked through the lobby in elegant clothes, their faces glowing with excitement. Rahil woke up early. She looked at her reflection in the mirror. Her eyes carried a mixture of strength and sadness. She placed a hand on her belly as if giving herself courage. Today was the day. She wore a long soft pink dress that hid her growing shape well. Her hair was tied in a neat bun, and a light scarf covered her shoulders. Picking up her music sheets, she left the room quietly. The hall looked more beautiful than before. White flowers lined the stage, golden candles flickered on every table, and the soft scent of roses floated in the air. Workers moved quickly to set everything in place. Rahil walked to the stage for a final check. Her fingers touched the piano keys softly as she hummed the first few lines of the song. And then, she felt his presence. Ian was standing near the entrance of the hall, dressed in a simple but sharp black suit. His hair was perfectly styled, his face calm but serious. Their eyes met for a brief moment, and the world around her slowed down. He walked toward her. "Everything ready?" he asked. "Yes," she replied, keeping her voice steady. "You will start when the guests are seated," he said. "Then there will be a short pause before the main ceremony." She nodded. "I understand." There was silence between them for a few seconds. It was not the silence of strangers, it was the silence of two people who once shared a world and now stood apart. Ian's eyes searched her face, as if looking for answers he could not ask. Rahil kept her gaze calm, giving nothing away. Before either of them could speak further, Meher entered the hall. She was dressed in a soft lavender gown for the pre-ceremony photos. Her smile lit up the space as she moved toward Ian. "You are here early," she said warmly to Rahil. "Yes, I wanted to check everything once more," Rahil replied politely. Meher smiled again and turned to Ian. "Everything seems perfect, doesn't it?" Ian nodded, but his eyes flickered back to Rahil for a brief second before he walked away with his bride-to-be. Rahil stood still, watching them from a distance. There was no hatred in her heart, only a quiet ache. She had promised herself she would not let old wounds spoil this day. She would sing, she would finish her part, and she would leave without creating any noise. The hours passed slowly. Guests filled the hall, their laughter and conversations blending with the music playing in the background. The lights grew brighter, and the golden canopy above the stage glowed softly. Rahil stood backstage, waiting for the signal. Her hands were slightly cold, but her voice felt steady. "A small girl," part of the flower-bearing group, ran past her and stopped. "You sing tonight?" she asked with innocent curiosity. "Yes," Rahil smiled gently. "Do you like songs?" The girl nodded. "I love songs. My mama says songs make hearts happy." Rahil's smile faded a little as she nodded. "Yes, they do." The signal came. The lights dimmed slightly, and the host announced her name. She stepped onto the stage, the soft fabric of her dress brushing against the polished floor. Eyes turned toward her, some curious, some admiring. Her voice began to flow gentle at first, then strong, filling the hall with emotion. The melody spoke of distant dreams and quiet goodbyes, but it carried a warmth that made the guests fall silent. From the corner of her eye, she saw Ian watching her again. His expression was unreadable, but his gaze did not leave her. The song ended with soft applause. She bowed slightly and stepped back. During a short break, Rahil moved to the side of the hall to drink some water. Ian came near her again, his voice low. "Your song, it feels like it carries a story," he said. "All songs carry stories," she replied simply. "Some stories feel close," he said, almost to himself. Rahil did not respond. She turned her gaze toward the stage, watching the guests as they laughed and chatted. Ian stood beside her for a moment, then spoke. "You look different, tired, maybe. Are you well?" She gave a small nod. "I am fine. Just a little tired from work." He wanted to say more, but the wedding planner called him again. He left, and Rahil let out a slow breath. The night was still young, but she felt its weight already. Every look, every word exchanged carried layers of memories that neither of them dared to open. As the guests prepared for the main ceremony, Rahil went backstage once more. Her hand moved gently over her belly, hidden beneath the soft pink fabric. "Just one night," she whispered to herself. "After this, we leave." But deep in her heart, she felt the quiet tension building. It was like a storm waiting far away on the horizon, not here yet, but moving closer with each passing moment. The wedding evening finally arrived. The grand hall glowed with golden lights, and the soft fragrance of roses floated through the air. Guests in elegant clothes filled the seats, their voices mixing with the gentle sound of background music. The chandeliers sparkled above, and the white curtains danced lightly as the evening breeze entered through the tall glass doors. Rahil stood behind the stage, her heart steady but her mind full of thoughts. Her soft pink dress flowed down to her ankles, and a delicate scarf rested on her shoulders. She had practiced this moment again and again, but tonight felt different. The memories of her past stood close, whispering quietly in her heart. The host stepped up to the microphone and announced, "Ladies and gentlemen, we are honored to welcome a voice that carries both grace and depth. Please give your attention to Miss Rahil, who will begin this evening with a melody of love and hope." The hall fell silent as she walked onto the stage. Her eyes scanned the crowd briefly, not searching for anyone but unable to stop herself from noticing him. Ian was seated near the front, dressed in a fine black suit, his posture calm but his gaze firm. Meher, the bride, sat beside him, her hands resting gently on her lap, her face glowing with quiet joy. Rahil took a deep breath and began to sing. The first note floated softly through the hall, reaching every corner with a calm yet powerful presence. The piano followed her voice, creating a melody that felt warm but carried an invisible ache. Her song spoke about journeys, about paths that meet and part, about promises that stay in the heart even when the road changes. Guests turned their faces toward her, some leaning forward to listen more closely. A woman in the third row held her husband's hand, a young man near the aisle stopped scrolling his phone. The words were simple, but the way she sang them made everyone pause. As Rahil sang, memories filled her mind. The nights when Ian had encouraged her to sing louder, the mornings when he sent her notes with kind words, the day when everything suddenly became quiet between them. Her voice trembled for a moment, but she steadied it quickly, letting the music carry her forward. Ian's eyes never left her. There was no smile on his face, no sign of pride or anger, only a deep stillness that even he could not explain. Meher glanced at him once, noticing his silence, but said nothing. The song reached its middle part. Rahil's hand lightly touched her belly as a faint unease passed through her body. The hall was warm, the lights bright, and for a second, her breath felt heavier. But she continued, her voice now stronger, almost as if she wanted the melody to carry her own heart away from the weight it held. When the song ended, there was a moment of stillness, that soft kind of silence when a room holds its breath. Then, the hall filled with applause. Guests clapped gently, some nodding in appreciation, some wiping the corners of their eyes. Rahil bowed slightly and stepped down from the stage. She walked toward the side table to drink some water. The sound of celebration rose behind her as waiters began serving refreshments. Ian approached her once more. "Your song," he said quietly, "it reached everyone." Rahil placed the glass down and replied, "That is what songs are meant to do." "You seem tired," he added, his voice lower now, almost careful. "It is just a long day," she answered simply. He wanted to speak more, but Meher called his name from across the hall. Guests had started gathering for the main ceremony, and he had to leave. Rahil sat in a quiet corner for a while, watching the crowd move. The laughter, the colors, the lights, everything around her felt so alive, yet she felt like a calm shadow in the middle of it all. The second part of the evening began. Couples danced lightly as the music played, and children ran around with soft laughter. Rahil was asked to prepare for her final song, the one that would mark the couple's dance. Backstage, she stood near the mirror and adjusted her scarf. Her reflection stared back at her, not just a singer, not just a guest, but someone carrying a story no one in this hall truly knew. She whispered to herself, "Just a little longer." The manager gave her the signal. It was almost time for the final performance. She held the microphone again, feeling its cool weight in her hands. The lights dimmed slightly as the couple entered the center of the hall. All eyes turned toward them. Rahil stepped forward, her voice ready to fill the hall once again. But in her heart, something had already begun to change. The music tonight was not just for them, it was for the quiet truth she carried, for the path she had walked alone, and for the questions that were slowly finding their way into Ian's eyes. The hall glowed even brighter as the night moved forward. The guests were now fully seated, and the music had softened to a gentle rhythm. The couple, Ian and Meher, stood in the center, ready for their special moment. Laughter, polite whispers, and the sound of clinking glasses filled the air. Backstage, Rahil held the microphone in her hands. Her soft pink dress flowed lightly as she walked toward the stage once more. Her heart was steady on the surface, but inside it was restless. Tonight, her songs had already stirred old memories, but this next song, the final one, felt heavier. The host announced her again, and the hall slowly quieted down. The lights dimmed a little, leaving only a warm golden glow on the couple and the stage. Rahil stepped forward. She began to sing a slow, emotional melody. The words spoke of time passing, of promises that leave quiet marks, of strength found in silence. Her voice was soft, yet it carried across the hall like a gentle tide touching every heart. As she sang, the hall seemed to forget its noise. The guests leaned in to listen. A child stopped running. Even the waiters carrying trays paused for a moment near the side tables. But in the middle of the song, Rahil felt a sudden sharp pull in her lower stomach. Her hand moved instinctively to her belly, pressing lightly as she steadied her breath. She did not stop singing, but her voice gained a new tremble, not from weakness, but from a wave of emotion she could not hold back. The light above her caught the shape of her dress as she moved slightly. For the first time, the gentle roundness beneath the fabric became noticeable to the people in the front rows. Whispers began, soft and surprised. Heads turned. A few guests looked from her to Ian, then back again, confusion passing over their faces. Ian sat frozen. His eyes widened as the truth began to form in his mind. The way she moved her hand, the tiredness in her face these past 2 days, the careful way she always adjusted her scarf, all of it connected now like pieces of a hidden picture. Meher noticed his stillness and followed his gaze. Her eyes softened as she understood something was different about the woman singing in front of them. Rahil finished the final lines of the song, her voice filled with quiet strength. The hall stayed silent for a long second before a gentle round of applause began. It was polite, soft, almost hesitant. She bowed slightly and stepped back, the light falling away from her as she moved toward the side of the hall. Her heart pounded not from fear, but from the sudden weight of being seen. Ian stood up from his seat and moved through the crowd. Guests watched as he walked toward her. His face held no anger, only a mix of shock and something deeper, something heavy and full of questions. "Rahil," he said when he reached her side, his voice low but clear. She turned to him calmly. "Yes. Why didn't you tell me?" His eyes searched hers, his voice careful, almost trembling. She looked at him for a long moment. There were so many things she could have said, but the hall was still full of watching eyes. "This is not the place," she replied softly. Ian's lips parted as if to speak again, but Meher approached, her steps calm and graceful. She placed a hand on his arm gently. "The guests are waiting," she said quietly. Her voice held no anger, only quiet understanding. Ian nodded slowly, but his eyes never left Rahil. Rahil stepped back, her hands folded in front of her. "I came here to sing," she said gently. Nothing more. The wedding moved forward, but the mood in the hall had shifted. Conversations turned into whispers. Guests exchanged quiet looks, wondering about the sudden tension between the singer and the groom. Rahil returned backstage, her hands shaking slightly as she sat down. The lights outside seemed too bright now. She closed her eyes, feeling the faint ache in her body settle again. The manager came to thank her for the performance, unaware of the storm moving quietly between the 3 people in the center of that grand hall. When the main ceremony ended, Rahil decided not to wait for the final applause or the photographs. She packed her music sheets, wrapped her scarf tightly around her, and stepped out into the cool night air. The city outside was quiet, the streets wet from an earlier drizzle. She walked slowly toward the car waiting for her, her mind heavy with the moment that had just passed. She had not planned for her secret to show. It had simply happened, like truth often does, quietly, without permission, in the middle of a song. Behind her, in the hall, Ian stood near the door, watching her leave. His heart was a storm of regret, questions, and memories he had tried to bury. He did not call out to her. Not yet. The hall was still alive with the sounds of celebration, but the earlier whispers had grown into a quiet wave of curiosity. Guests exchanged glances, some asking softly if they had seen what they thought they had. The bride smiled politely, greeting everyone with grace, but her eyes followed Ian, who had barely moved from his place near the door. Rahil had already stepped out into the cool night. The soft glow of the street lights touched her face as she walked toward the hotel garden. The evening air carried the scent of wet grass. She sat on a wooden bench, placing her scarf around her shoulders to block the light breeze. Her heart was calm on the surface, but her mind was restless. She had sung with all her strength, she had kept her promise to perform, and yet everything felt unfinished. Footsteps approached. Rahil turned slightly. Ian was there. His suit was still perfect, his steps quiet but firm. He stood a few feet away, his hands by his sides, his eyes holding a storm of thoughts. "Rahil," he said quietly. She looked at him without fear. "Yes. Is it true?" His voice was soft but steady. "The child, is it mine? Rahil lowered her gaze for a moment. The silence between them felt like 1,000 words that had been waiting for months. She finally spoke, her tone calm. Yes, Ayan. The child is yours. Ayan's shoulders stiffened. The sound of distant music floated from the hall, but here in the garden, it felt like another world. Why didn't you tell me? His question came slowly, almost like a whisper. Rahil looked up at him, her eyes steady. When you left, I waited. Days turned into weeks. I called you twice, but your office said you were busy. I sent a letter that never came back. I thought you made your choice. Ayan's face changed not with anger, but with something heavier, regret. I was building everything, he said quietly. I was trying to create a life where we could both stand without worry. But in the middle of it, I lost track of what really mattered. Rahil folded her hands on her lap. And now you are here, with someone else. I never wanted to stop your life. I chose to walk my own path. He stepped closer. You were carrying my child, Rahil. I had the right to know. And I had the right, she said softly, to not beg for attention from someone who walked away without a word. The words were not loud, but they struck him deeply. For a long moment, neither spoke. The sound of the city cars far away became the only background. Meher appeared at the entrance of the garden. She looked at both of them, her expression calm but serious. The guests are asking for you, Ayan, she said. Then she turned to Rahil. You are leaving already? Rahil stood slowly. Yes. My part is finished. Meher looked at her gently. You sang beautifully. And, if what I saw is true, then I only hope you find peace in whatever choice you make next. There was no sharpness in her tone, only quiet kindness. Rahil nodded. Thank you. Meher looked at Ayan one more time, then turned and walked back toward the hall, leaving them in the soft glow of the garden lamps. Ayan spoke again, his voice low. I do not expect you to forgive me easily. But I want to make things right. For you. For the child. Rahil shook her head slightly. It is not that simple, Ayan. Life has moved. I have built my strength without waiting for anyone. I came here to sing, not to open the past. He looked down at the ground, his hands tightening into fists before relaxing again. Will you at least let me be part of what is coming? I cannot undo what I missed, but I can choose not to run anymore. Rahil looked at him for a long moment. The night breeze lifted a strand of her hair. Her heart felt heavy, but she also felt a strange calmness. This is not a decision to make in one night, she said. If you want to be part of this child's life, you will have to show it, not just say it. Ayan nodded slowly. Then I will try. The music in the hall grew louder as another dance began. Rahil wrapped her scarf tighter and began walking toward the hotel gate. Ayan followed her for a few steps, then stopped, watching her leave once again, but this time, not as a man who turned away, but as a man trying to return. The guests would continue their evening, the lights would keep shining, and the world would think the wedding had gone on as planned. But in the quiet garden, something else had started, a thread of truth, a path of responsibility, and a chance for two lives to face what had been hidden for too long. The night had grown deeper, yet the hotel hall still glowed with lights. Guests danced and laughed, but the earlier tension still lingered quietly in the air. Rahil had returned to her room to gather her belongings, her soft pink dress now slightly creased from the evening's events. She sat by the window for a moment, looking out at the quiet streets below. The city lights shimmered on wet pavements, reflecting like scattered stars. Her hand instinctively rested on her belly. The tiny life growing inside her had been a secret, a quiet strength, a reason to move forward even when the past weighed heavily on her heart. Singing tonight had been her way of facing her past, but leaving without confrontation had felt impossible. The soft knock at her door startled her. She turned and saw Ian standing there, his expression serious but gentle. He stepped inside without waiting for an invitation. "Rahil," he said quietly, "I know you need space. I just wanted to speak before you leave." She folded her arms, a small sign of caution. "Speak, then. But keep it brief." Ian nodded. "I cannot change what happened. I cannot bring back the time I lost. But I can promise you this: I will not turn away from my responsibilities again. I want to be there for our child, and I want to support you, in any way you choose." Rahil studied him carefully. She had spent months imagining this moment, and now that it had arrived, she felt the weight of her emotions. Anger, sadness, and a quiet hope all collided within her. "Words are easy, Ian," she said softly. "It is actions that matter. If you truly mean what you say, you must prove it over time." He nodded again, understanding the gravity of her words. "I will. I promise." Rahil exhaled slowly, the tension in her shoulders easing just slightly. For the first time in months, she felt a small thread of relief. She had faced him, and though the past could not be erased, she had taken control of her own story. The two of them stood in silence for a moment, listening to the distant music of the hall. Outside, the night air was cool, carrying the scent of rain and flowers. Rahil finally stood and adjusted her scarf. "I need to go," she said. "This night, it is over for me." Ian looked at her with a mixture of hope and regret. "Will you let me walk with you, at least for a moment?" She nodded slightly, and together they stepped into the hotel's quiet garden. The soft glow of lamps illuminated their path. Rahil walked with steady steps, her mind alert but her heart slowly opening to the possibility of a future that included both her child and, cautiously, Ian. "I was wrong," he said quietly. "I should have been there from the beginning. I left when you needed me most, and I cannot take that back. But I will not make the same mistake again." Rahil looked at him, her eyes calm but filled with a depth of emotion. "Actions, Ian. We will see in time. I cannot rush into trusting you again." He nodded solemnly. "I understand. I will earn it." For a few minutes, they walked in silence. The night was peaceful, broken only by distant sounds from the city streets. Rahil felt a strange comfort in the quietness. The storm of emotion that had built inside her all evening was settling into something calmer, a sense of possibility she had not allowed herself to feel before. Finally, they reached the edge of the garden, where her car waited. Rahil paused and looked at him. "This is where we part for now." Ian nodded, his eyes soft but steady. "Until next time." "Until next time," she replied, her voice quiet but firm. She opened the car door and stepped inside. As the car pulled away, she looked out at the garden one last time. Ian stood there, watching her leave, not with anger, not with despair, but with a resolve to be better, to prove through actions what words could never fully convey. The city passed by in a blur of lights and quiet streets. Rahil rested her hand gently on her belly, feeling a small heartbeat echoing against her palm. She smiled faintly, a mixture of hope and determination settling in her chest. The future was uncertain, but it was hers to shape. In the hotel hall, the wedding continued, the celebration alive and bright. Guests laughed and danced, unaware of the quiet resolutions made outside, unaware of the threads of redemption and courage that had quietly begun to weave themselves between two lives forever connected. Rahil knew that life would not be simple. There would be challenges, decisions, and tests of patience and strength. But she also knew that tonight she had faced the past, sung her truth, and taken the first step toward protecting her child and herself. And somewhere in the distance, she felt a small, quiet hope that Ian would indeed change, that the future could hold something more than regret, something filled with responsibility, care, and perhaps, slowly, forgiveness. The car moved forward into the quiet city night, carrying Rahil and her unborn child. The past remained behind, but the possibilities of tomorrow stretched ahead like a soft, golden horizon, waiting to be shaped by courage, patience, and quiet determination. Rahil rested her head against the window, the soft hum of the engine a gentle lullaby. Tonight had been difficult, emotional, and unexpected. Yet, in the depth of her heart, she felt the first glimmer of peace she had known in months. The story of this night, of lost love, music, and quiet truths, was ending. But a new chapter, one of hope and responsibility, was just beginning.